Okay, we're going to get started here. Like I had mentioned, thank you all for joining the Connecting with Generation Z webinar. My name is Caroline Ickes. I'm Director of Strategic Partnerships at ISA. And over the course of the last year, 2 years, I've become very interested in Generation Z and how are they different from our millennial students before them, and how does that change how we communicate and interact with them, specifically for study of our programming, pre-departures. And so today we're going to look at some of the research that has been done on higher education and Gen Z and pull some of that to counter with how that affects international education and study abroad. So to get started, we're going to play a fun game called Kahoot. So you all can take out your phones or on your desktop too and go to kahoot.it. And it'll be just a fun way to start and see how well we know Gen Z. For those of you all who have never done Kahoot, when you go to kahoot.it, this is what it will look like. And then you will enter in this PIN. Once you enter in the PIN, you can choose your name. You can pick a nickname or your real name. You'll show up here as one of the players. And then we'll get started. You all will be able to see the questions on the screen. And then on your phone or your desktop, it'll display the answers as colored shapes. And you can click on the colored shape to choose your answer. I should mention that I use Kahoot in several different presentations because while we might be educators or advisors, coordinators, similar to our students, we like engagement too. But several universities have now used this for their pre-departures and to help some, those 500 student pre-departure sessions, have a little bit more interaction, and this is a really great way to do that. And also I should mention, if you have any trouble getting into this, the game pen will be displayed throughout it, so you can jump in later, or if unfortunately you get kicked off, you can jump in too. Okay, we're going to get started. All right, so how many hours of media are we expected to consume daily? 11, 15, 12, or 10? Okay, the answer is 15. A lot of that is on top of each other. It's not obviously all at once. That's a lot. And so that does underscore how difficult it can be for students to prioritize information and to know what they should be paying attention to. All right. It is said that Gen Z is blank than boomers and more blank than millennials. Are they fancier than boomers and more creative than millennials? Angrier than boomers and more mobile than millennials? Smarter than boomers and more ambitious than millennials? Or wealthier than boomers and more entitled than millennials? Smarter and more ambitious. And I think that speaks a lot of positive to the generation that's coming and that we'll be able to engage with as students. All right. What percentage of Gen Z exhibits emotional distress when separated from their devices? 92%, 79%, 32%, or 55%? Oh no, 79%. Still very high amount of students, and I think probably for us adults as well. All right, Gen Zers are blank and millennials are optimist. Are they pessimist, realist, or opportunist? Realist. And I'll get into this a little bit, but a lot of that comes from their development during the Great Recession and seeing how that impacted their family members. So specifically with finances, They are much more realistic and seek stability in that kind of a manner. Okay, what is the best learning environment for Gen Z? Simulations, analytical, hands-on, or theoretical? Hands-on, so they seek hands-on learning. What do they consider an outdated form of communication? Phone, text, or email? Email. A lot of them say that they know that they need to use this for work, and it's something that it's a skill that they'd like to develop, but they don't see it as something in their personal lives that they use very frequently. All right, who is more likely to follow the influence of their parents? Millennials, Gen Z, or Gen X? Gen Z, we're talking about Gen Z, so that's probably a giveaway, but their parents are very influential, and for us that does mean that we need to engage with parents as collaborators in the discussion and the decision to study abroad. On average, how many seconds do you have to catch the attention of Gen Z? 6, 4, 8, or 15? Eight-seconds. So this has been touted a lot about the 8-second attention span. It's not necessarily the attention span, it's 8 seconds that you have to convince them that they need to pay attention to what you are saying, or so that they can prioritize your information above all the rest. Okay, let's see who won. Mullen. But y'all did a really great job. So now we're going to jump back into the presentation. Oops. Okay, so you all did really good and did a great job with that Kahoot. I should mention we'll have a question and answer section at the end of the presentation, so if there are any things that you want to discuss there, you can actually just add it in the chat box now as you think about it or later. Just a little to review. So 61 million strong, they're born between 1994 and 2010. Their generational characteristics are shaped by the Great Recession. 57% would rather save their money than spend it. By 2020, Gen Z will account for 40% of all consumers. They find email an outdated form of communication, and they're more likely to visit YouTube than any other social site and prefer it to interact with organizations there. So those are some just quick statistics about who is Gen Z. Now, a lot of us had engaged significantly with millennials, and the easiest way to understand Gen Z is how are they different from millennials. So where millennials were idealist, Gen Z is pragmatic. And again, this comes from, post 9/11, Great Recession. This is the environment that they were raised in, and so it does affect some of their perceptions and preferences for the world. Millennials sought freedom and flexibility, whereas Gen Z seeks security and stability. Millennials see education as an investment, whereas Gen Z is cautious with spending and really wants to know how it's going to benefit them and what kind of return on investment they should anticipate. Millennials communicate via text and email, whereas Gen Z is more face-to-face in text. A lot of this goes into the visual communication, as mentioned before, their desire to see things on YouTube. So videos and pictures and emojis are the way that they'll communicate, much more visual than where millennials were based on text. Millennials were very global, whereas Gen Z is very diverse. It's going to be the most ethnically diverse generation in the US. Millennials were digital natives, whereas Gen Z always had digital technology available to them. So they have a higher standard of how it should work for them, and so they expect intuitive technology. And we always heard a lot about helicopter parents for millennials. For Gen Z, they're calling them stealth fighter parents. And where this is different, where helicopter parents kind of hovered above their student, always kind of watching in on them. Stealth fighter parents are there, but they prefer to let their student handle things by themselves until there's a problem, and then they swoop in and will take care of it. And I would say a lot of us probably have experienced that, where you don't even know the parent is in the picture until something goes wrong, and then you find out that they've been copied on everything and that they're very well aware of what's happening and they want to fix it right now. So, what are some of the similarities? Both of them are very big on developing a personal brand. They want to have a high impact on the world, they want to be high achieving, and they're wary of big business. Okay. So in terms of, say recruiting students to study abroad or getting them interested in different educational forms, it's important to know how to appeal to Gen Z. Some of this information comes from consumer research because they were some of the first to study Gen Z. Higher education, there's fewer studies out right now and even fewer on study abroad, but I think we're getting there and tying in a lot of this information of how it affects us. First of all, they're hyper aware of their image. They're constructing their digital brand, their Instagrams and social media posts. They're very aware that that is their public persona. Some of them even, I don't know if you all have heard of this, they have Finstas, they have fake Instagrams, which are what they share with their close circle of friends, and they're a little more real pictures and posts, and their Instagram is what they want to project to the world. They have a curated digital footprint. Everything, they're very mindful, not everyone, but a lot of them are very mindful about how they use social media. A lot of the students on your college campus might be sponsored for their Instagram, depending on how many followers and likes they have. And they're seeing how they can use it to their benefit. They're digitally proficient, so they do have a high threshold or a low threshold when it comes to working with new technology, and they're drawn to aesthetic products. So that means our websites and our digital resources need to work and they need to look good in order for them to be willing to interact with them. In terms of understanding their parents, as we noted, they're very influenced by their parents and their parents are involved. Some of the things that the research is showing, and of course these are typically Gen X parents, but could be baby boomers too. They're involved when warranted, and that's stealth fighter parent mode. They're skeptical and price conscious. They're digitally literate researchers. So this all kind of goes, skeptical and price conscious goes together, that they're going to, some of the characteristics of Gen X is that, they're always looking to see what kind of things they might be able to do a la carte or by themselves, and is it really necessary to spend that much money? And so that does influence how their student is approaching education, and they probably have already researched all of the different options, and so they are much more aware than previous parents about what kind of opportunities are available to their students. And this one, I think, goes to that stealth fighter parent, willing to bypass the system. So if there's a problem and they're just not getting heard and it's not getting fixed in the time that they're expecting, they're very willing to go to the top. Those are the presidents of the universities or presidents of organizations, and using social media and the internet to really make their voices heard. So those are some of the unique characteristics of the parents of Generation Z compared to the parents of millennials. Now, how does this affect higher education? Like I said, there's not a ton of research about this. There's a few coming out, but it seems like every day there's new studies and articles being published about Gen Z and higher ed and how it's going to impact this space. So I pulled out a couple of big highlights. One is that they're focused education as a means to an end. So compared to millennials who saw education as an investment and intrinsically beneficial, they're looking at it and really parsing it out and saying, okay, well then if I'm going to pay this much for a degree, what is it preparing me to do, and what kind of career and profession should I expect to have with this? So universities are having to be much more articulate about the benefits of their degrees or their education plans, and study abroad as well, about not just this is a great experience, but how is it going to impact them and have that ROI. They want to be more hands-on and more engaged with their learning. They talk about kind of a return of the apprenticeship, that students will want to be, shadowing people, learning different trades and skills through boot camps and online certifications, and really tailoring their education plan to fit the outcome that they desire. They also will be seeking digital resources and virtual education. Most universities have shifted to a lot of digital courses available and digital resources, and so students expect that they should be able to take courses wherever, and if they want to be away from campus, that should be available. This also goes into how they are approaching education and the courses even that they're taking on campus, with a lot of the new learning management systems that have apps and resources that they can continue their education wherever they are. So as long as they have a smartphone, if they're in line for Starbucks, that they can respond to their professor through an app. And that's the kind of engagement that they are seeking for higher education. And then just going back to that 8-second filter for prioritization, this is involved with higher education too. I mean, even though they might have chosen to take a class and to seek that information, it still is important to keep in mind when we're communicating with them, and even in the classroom space, that the way that we craft messages, that we are highlighting the importance of certain things and drawing their attention and helping them to craft the ability to prioritize information. Because as we saw in the quiz, if we're expected to consume 15 hours of media every day, that takes a skill to know, okay, I need to prioritize this email from my university above the email that I got from Pizza Hut. It might seem easy for us, but for them, this is a lot of information being thrown at them at once, and sometimes it comes in at the same level. And as much as we can help them to understand how to pull and parse out those important pieces, we'll be helping them, and educating them in this digital space. So these are just a few takeaways here, and some things that you can do to help craft a better message for Generation Z students and to engage with them better. Making your emails bite-sized. I think this is one of the most important ways that we can change our communication, is really looking at how much we're emailing. A lot of emails I see, if we put them into a Word document, it would be 5 pages. It's too much. I know that they need to get all that information, but pulling it out and maybe sending 5 different emails. If you have to put a lot of information in an email, summarizing it at the beginning as a way to draw their prioritization and saying, okay, I'm emailing you about your visa application, and there are 3 steps that you need to follow. Put those bullets, and then say, if you want to know more about those 3 steps, I've put that information below, and allowing them to kind of customize it and to seek the information as they need it. This also goes to making sure the emails are timely. That if they need to be applying for their visa application, make sure that's the email that you're sending that week, and that you're not sending pre-departure information that week too. As much as we can help them to really draw their attention to the important things during the timeline and the process for study abroad, it will help them to be able to manage that and to respond to us and engage with us quickly. Keeping information concise. This is hard because I know, there's a lot of really meaty things that we need to be conveying to students, a lot of important details. But one thing that I try to draw people's attention to is that if we don't write good emails that they're able to digest, then we're missing them completely. So it is to our benefit to craft better emails and to make them more concise and give them abilities, maybe to hyperlink, to say, if you need to know more information about this, hyperlink, you can find it here. But not feeling like we need to throw all the information at them at once just to, later be able to say, hey, I sent you that email and, you didn't see it. But instead really thinking about what's the best way that we can get their attention, because that's going to benefit them to be more prepared, and it's going to benefit us because we're going to have fewer emails and fewer incidences that occur because they simply were unable to digest all the information that we sent at them. a few different, so those bite-sized, timely, and concise, I think those are things that we can individually be mindful of and really encouraging our colleagues, and especially those who are communicating with students, to dig into. The others take a little bit more office-wide support, making things a little bit more graphic. This presentation is a really good example of a graphic presentation that appeals to Gen Z. Taking your information and figuring out how you can display it in ways that do show that prioritization and the steps, so that they can synthesize it quicker, will go a long ways. Tailoring information specifically to their experience. I know a lot of us are dealing with a large amount of students, but to the degree in which we can tailor the communication so it's relevant to them, they're going to feel more invested and they're going to dig in a little deeper. But if it's just, all of you students, here's some general information that you may or not apply to you, they're going to tune out. But if they say, you student who's studying in Sevilla this spring, here's the information that you need to start working on, they're gonna have that engagement. And then looking at how we can make things more virtual. This goes to our digital resources as well as virtual communication. One thing that we've started here is doing text advising and text communication, so that if a student prefers to be communicated via text, that we have that ability and we give them that option to choose if they'd like us to email, if they prefer that we email them or call them or text them, and allowing them to choose what kind of communication they'd like from us. And sometimes text is the best because it does cut through all of those different emails and communication that they're getting thrown at them at all times. And so considering those kind of things, or maybe virtual advising. We also just started using a booking site called Simply Book Me, where students can see the availability of our advisors here and book a time that works for them. And then they can choose to give us a call, or we can do that over video, and they can also engage their parents in that. So that's something that is available, and if that's something that you think would be helpful for your students, maybe even if you have a large campus and they're over on their dorms, maybe offering virtual advising so that they don't have to schlep all the way over to your office might help. And as some of that research showed, they do prefer face-to-face, so giving that human interaction, that human touch, does help with communicating with these students. So those are just a few things. There's certainly a lot more that you could, as an office, if you have more buy-in, more time, work on to kind of Gen Z your processes, but these are some that I think everybody can do individually and make a huge difference. So that's it. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to put those in the chat box. I'll give you all a few minutes. And I do have somebody who's asking if they can get a copy of the presentation. I can surely send that out to you all. I didn't cite a lot of the research here because it does make it a little clunkier on the presentation format, but I can send you quite a few links to articles and some of the studies that have been done. I will say every day there's more stuff being published about Gen Z, so start looking into it and keep investigating this and see how it changes. One thing that's a little discouraging and also encouraging is that every 2 to 3 years there's going to be more micro generations, and so it's every 2 to 3 years we need to review our communication and our processes and make sure that they're still meeting the needs of the group, because as technology rapidly changes, it also is going to speed up the way that we communicate. And so I would say about every 2 years you need to take a step back and consider how you're communicating and if your resources are hitting the mark. So one of the questions that we got is, what about using images? And you're saying, appealing to being graphic. Yes, I think in terms of making your communication graphic, that does include images as well. I went to a presentation, I think at CIEE in Austin, and there was a presenter who talked about in the next, I think it was 10 years, that the majority of our communication is going to be done via video. And that does speak to the importance of visual communication. So graphic, images, emojis, anything that can draw their attention in. What we've done is For ISA, we have changed all of our emails for students to be really mobile friendly and scrollable, very image heavy, and we give them abilities to click on different icons depending on what kind of information they want at that time. We also tried to take a step back in terms of what does a student need when they immediately first become interested in studying abroad and say they've talked to somebody at ISA. We can't really jump into, well, where do you want to go and what do you want to study? But when you kind of want to step back and say, well, what is study abroad? What is it? What all does that include? And then who is ISA and why should they study with ISA? And now let's look and see, where they would like to go. So I think that's something useful too, is thinking about, we kind of step in mid-cycle sometimes with students because we assume that they have this level of knowledge. Maybe we need to step back and really start with, what is study abroad, and make that, that can be really beautifully displayed with images about this is study abroad, this is your classroom abroad, these pictures from your peers at your university you took last year on the study abroad programs, this is what it means. And those are some of the great ways to kind of invoke that emotion through images. Let's see. So somebody asked about how long the emails are usually, mobile-friendly ones. They're about 2 scrolls, I think. And maybe I can, when I send you all this, maybe I can show you all a few examples of what we've done. But it's about 2 scrolls on the mobile device. The first image is what gathers their attention, and then there's a little bit more about how to engage if they scroll. But just keeping them really user-friendly is the key. And then I had another question about any advice about how to best use social media. This is something that we constantly work at ISA. Our marketing team does, I think, a really great job at tailoring our communication and always kind of evolving it. There is a lot of research to show that Facebook is being used less by Generation Z and more by their parents, so that has changed some of the way that we've communicated on Facebook and making it more of a resource for parents and students as a way to engage. Instagram, Snapchat. One thing I really like that we did just recently is on Instagram, we had our resident directors from Australia let everybody follow them through Instagram stories of our Bridging Cultures program. And so students could see exactly what it would be like to be on the Bridging Cultures program and to see, what their experience would be like if they chose to study abroad in Australia next year. And I thought that was a really great way of, using a tool to put them in, their future self's shoes and to really kind of imagine what that experience would be like. Okay, so I think those are all the questions. Thanks so much for joining in today. I will try to send you all this presentation as well as some of the resources that I used, and maybe if I can get a few of the snapshots of our emails, I can send that on too. But I hope this was helpful, and like I said, hopefully it just sparks enough interest that then you all can go away and start reviewing it and seeing, what your university is doing to adjust to Generation Z and what kind of unique new takes have they been coming out with recently, because it's definitely evolving and I think it's quite fascinating. So have a great day. Thanks again.